To win World War II, armies needed machines that could do the impossible. They needed machines that could swim. From the famous American duck to strange Japanese floating tanks, here is every single amphibious vehicle used in the war. Let's dive in. We begin with the United States, the undisputed kings of amphibious logistics. First, the legend, the GMC DUKW. Soldiers simply called it the Duck. Based on a standard six-wheel army truck, it was watertight and propeller-driven. It was not built for combat but for logistics, ferrying millions of tons of supplies from ships directly to the front lines. Without the Duck, the Allied advance would have stalled. Next, the Ford GPA, or Seep. The idea was simple: make a swimming Jeep. However, it was a failure. It sat too low in the water and often sank in rough waves. American troops hated it, so most were sent to Russia via Lend-Lease. Then we have the M29C Weasel. Originally designed for snow operations, the C variant added flotation tanks, making it a master of muddy swamps and rivers. But the true stars of the Pacific were the LVTs, the Landing Vehicle Tracked. It started with the LVT-1, nicknamed the Alligator. It was slow and unarmored, but it proved that tracks could swim. The LVT-2 improved the suspension for better land speed. But the game changer was the LVT-3 and LVT-4. These models moved the engine forward to create a massive rear ramp. For the first time, troops could run out the back instead of jumping over the dangerous sidewalls. Finally, the U.S. turned these transports into tanks. The LVT-A1 mounted a 37mm gun, and the LVT-A4 carried a massive 75mm howitzer. These Am-Tanks provided crucial fire support, blasting bunkers while floating in the surf. Now, let's look at Germany. They did not have a massive navy, but their engineering was unique. The most famous was the Volkswagen Schwimmwagen. Based on the Beetle and designed by Ferdinand Porsche, this was the most mass-produced amphibious car in history. It used a simple drop-down propeller at the rear. It was light, fast, and perfect for scouting. A rarer sight was the triple SG6, a luxury-style amphibious car used mainly by commanders and pioneers. But the true strangest German machine was the Landwasser Schlepper. This was not a car. It was a river tugboat on tracks. Unarmored and massive, it was designed to tow heavy barges onto beaches. It looked clumsy, but it was one of the few vehicles capable of moving heavy German equipment across rivers. In the Pacific, the Imperial Japanese Navy took a completely different approach. They built tanks that could swim, but with a catch. Their main vehicle was the Type II Kami. Unlike American vehicles, this tank relied on large hollow pontoons attached to the front and back to float. It looked bulky in the water, but once it reached the beach, the crew would detach the pontoons, turning it back into a standard light tank. Later in the war, they developed the larger Type III Ka-Chi. It was heavily armored and looked almost like a submarine when sealed up. Even stranger was the Type IV Ka-Tsu. This was not a tank, but a submersible cargo carrier designed to ride on the back of submarines and carry torpedoes for surprise attacks. And for logistics, they had the Toyota Tsuki, a four-wheel drive boat truck used to supply isolated island garrisons. The British were the innovators of D-Day. Their most famous contribution was the Sherman DD, or duplex drive. Instead of a heavy metal hull, it used a collapsible canvas screen to float. It looked ridiculous. Soldiers called it the Donald Duck, but it allowed a 30-ton tank to swim. While many sank in rough seas, those that made it provided essential armor support on D-Day. They practiced on the Valentine DD, an older tank converted for training crews. Britain also built the Terrapin Mark I, an 8-wheeled monster with 2 engines. It was incredibly effective at moving cargo, but having no suspension meant the crew had a terrible, bumpy ride. Finally, the Soviet Union. With thousands of rivers to cross on the Eastern Front, they focused on small, light, amphibious tanks.
The T-37A was the first mass-produced amphibious tank in the world. It was tiny and lightly armored, used strictly for scouting. It was followed by the T-38, which made the hull wider and more stable in the water. The peak of their design was the T-40. It featured a modern turret and heavy machine guns, proving vital in the muddy defense of Moscow before the T-34 took over the battlefield. From the massive American Amtracs to the tiny German Schwimmwagens, these machines bridged the gap between sea and land. They were often slow and vulnerable, but without them, the great invasions of World War II would have been impossible. Which design do you think was the smartest, the American tracks or the Japanese pontoons? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.